Hi guys, it's Luetin here, and today I'm joined by Daskro, and we're going to be talking about the video that I made the other day. I made a video the other day talking about a few elements, wishes that I would like to see put into Battlefield 4, and I asked you guys to give your feedback, give ideas, and things that you wanted to see in Battlefield 4, and I said that I would put these questions to Daskro. We'd have a little bit of a talk about your ideas. Now, there was, of course, plenty of mention about the battle recorder and suppression tweaks, so let's just really quickly look at those because they've been talked about a lot, and of course everybody wants to see some kind of changes to these elements, and people want to see battle recorder brought in, but they have been talked about a lot, so we'll just kind of have a very brief look. So Daskro, what are your thoughts about battle recorder and suppression in brief?
Well, I am certainly for battle recorder and spectator mode and all the various ways that we can provide new features that allow us to experience each other's battlefield moments. That's core. That's what it's about. It's about experiencing the game and the game that our friends play and other things around those lines. On the suppression front, suppression is a very controversial topic, and I've taken both sides of that debate over the last few years, and let me just put it in this context. I think that suppression has a place in Battlefield and future Battlefield games if it is done correctly and can be done in the context of providing the user a fun, immersive, and viable experience. A viable experience in that I want to see various classes within the game, support for example, to be viable. And if it means giving support class, for instance, the ability to suppress and no one else, then I'm okay with that. But as long as it's done in a way that doesn't make the game breaking in terms of the player experience.
I think that's definitely true. I think there's a lot of small tweaks that they could make to actually make it more effective. Like you say, suppression from support classes would make a hell of a lot more sense. I think perhaps quantity of rounds. Maybe a certain amount of rounds has to actually pass by you in order for you to become properly suppressed, not just 2 or 3 rounds and all of a sudden, whoa, I can't fire properly. No, you need to have like a volley of fire come at you, or for you to be properly suppressed. But there's a lot of tweaks around that. So guys, feel free to drop your thoughts about suppression, how you would tweak it specifically, how would you make little changes to it. But let's go on to our first real question, and this is from it's LS357 Alpha. He says there should definitely be jets in Battlefield 4. This was in response to me saying that I didn't feel that jets particularly worked well, but I also said that I felt there was a compromise to be had. I actually said that I felt like jets had more of a role in Conquest than they do in Rush. In Rush, those jets, it's just two jets, and they tend to they either have no involvement in the game whatsoever, or one guy is godly and he removes everything from the ground. I often feel like they just don't work particularly well in Rush. I think that helicopter combat and those kind of ground integrated involvements are much stronger for Rush game modes, whereas jets in Conquest, not only is the battlefield much larger, so you have a much greater theatre of engagement, I think they actually have more involvement. The fact that you have 2 jets, I would like to see more than that, for example, in Conquest roles, because I think it'd be a lot more exciting. I also think it would be good to have jets in Conquest spawn in the same way we've seen in Air Superiority, so they actually spawn in the air to prevent people dropping down, stealing and runway killing and all that kind of stuff. So I think that would be a good change. But anyway, Alpha, he says there definitely should be jets in Battlefield 4. He says jets should be able to drop bombs because jets in Battlefield 3 are a bit pointless since the real function of a jet is giving the team air support. He says the only thing that jets do in Battlefield 3 is dogfighting against other jets. Of course, sometimes they destroy tanks and stuff, but not very often. So I don't understand Luetin saying that jets are too overpowered. Give jets their real function to support the team, add bombs, and give them, those bombs give them a balanced explosion. So from that point of view, Daskro, what do you think about what he said there about jets in Battlefield?
Well, I don't believe in this idea of a well-rounded singular jet. I think that when we look back at past Battlefield games, there has been a conscious effort to make jets that have been focused on air superiority, and others jets that are focused on doing strike missions. I look back to the good old days of Battlefield 1942, where you had, for instance, in Coral Sea, you had a strike aircraft focused on throwing torpedoes and bombs, and you had another aircraft focused on dogfights, although they did have bombs they could drop as well.
Yeah.
However, the lighter aircraft was clearly superior in the air dominance fight compared to its heavier brother in this respect. That being said, maybe we could have some kind of compromise in the same way. And for instance, you could have an A10 and an F18. F18 more focused on air dominance,
Yeah.
and the A10 more focused on ground pounding. I'd love to see something like that. I don't like the idea of it being sort of a jack of all trades, but I am open to the idea of having them being customizable so that you create an air superiority mission versus creating a strike mission. You and I actually talked about this a while back about you could actually create different loadouts that could change the performance of the aircraft, because in actual fighter combat and air superiority that takes place in real life, weight's a big issue. And if you can take out the number of ordnances that aircraft is carrying to reduce the weight, you can turn faster, you're able to be more maneuverable, and that's a big deal. I'd like to see that kind of thing take place. That may be a bit of a stretch, but that's sort of my feel of what you could do with jets in the future.
I definitely agree, because I really feel that, the kind of maneuverability and those kind of things, that's one thing that really seems to like bug me and drag me down with the F-18s and things like that. The kind of the way that all the different jets move, it really does, there's a significant amount of handling. And if you know what you're doing and you've practiced so much to do it, then yeah, sure, you can. But I like the idea that you could specifically tweak it, because I think it would help balance it. So for example, okay, if you were not the number one, and this goes hand in hand with how you set up your normal classes, your other vehicles and things like that, because people will tweak their classes to kind of benefit them. And that's one of the best things about Battlefield I've always found, is that it's not about being godlike with every single thing. It's about playing to your strengths. And some people are maybe going to be, some people don't even fly at all because they feel that they just simply can't. And I've always felt it's a bit of a shame. It would be fantastic if they could make some tweaks to the aircraft to make it more manageable for themselves, to allow them to kind of have some enjoyment for it. So I like that idea. But just to put to you as well, what do you think about the whole idea about removing jets from Rush but keeping them in Conquest? Is that something you would want to see, or do you think that jets should have a role in all aspects of gameplay?
I think that jets in Rush gameplay is going to be completely contingent on the map topography and size of the map. If it's a small map, jets really shouldn't have a big role to play. But it's a giant map. I kind of think of the first round or first stage of Strike at Karkin at Karg Island. Jets do have a place there. It's a very big open map, although it's a bit linear because they're all the ships are coming, or the IFVs are coming in from the amphib. But that's a really good example of where jets have a place, but there are going to be other ones that don't. And so it's going to be completely contingent on map size and topography and other things around those lines.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one other element to come in with the air combat stuff is that, as I've mentioned before, one thing that I would really like to see is kind of a bit more variation with helicopters, a lot more kind of difference in loadouts and stuff like that for your helicopter classes, about what you kind of equip them with. And I also would like to see a lot more variation in helicopters. So for example, with Bad Company 2, we obviously had like the Black Hawk, and we had the Hind, and so on and so on. And then of course you've got the standard, what's the Russian helicopter called? I always forget.
The Mi-17?
Yeah, that's the one. So you've got all these different kind of helicopters, and it would be great to see a little bit more variation in. I know obviously that with Battlefield 3 you've got the Venom, the Viper, and then we've obviously got the Scout helicopters, etc., and the Russian helicopters. So there is kind of more variation. Everyone seems to kind of, whenever we talk about helicopters, everyone always talks about the transport and the attack, and people seem to forget about the Scout helicopters, but they're still there. But I would like to see a little bit more variation, because I think helicopters have got a really good role to play, whether that be through customization or just a couple of other options. But anyway, go on. Is that something you want to see? How would you do that?
I would love to see the V-22 come into the mix, which is aircraft. It can take off like a helicopter and or land like a fixed-wing aircraft. And so I love the idea of this of being on an amphib, kind of like in Gulf of Oman, and taking off vertically and then going really fast into a given point. Yeah. And I really like that idea. Now, granted, it would be real vulnerable to the jets, but that's okay. I'm down with that. I think it'd be really cool, though.
One of my ones that I particularly wanted to see, my choice for helicopter to bring in would be the Sikorsky Super Stallions. I really would like to see that as a helicopter in Battlefield 3, not just for its amazing presence. I think those helicopters are astonishing. They're just big. They look awesome. They're just so powerful as well. But I mean,
people do not appreciate how gigantic the CH-53Ks are.
Yeah.
If they were in the game, they would be huge,
Yeah,
and
they are,
people
yeah.
would be amazed by how much leg room is in the inside and things
Yeah.
like that. Because they're big aircraft.
They're very big, but I would like to see them from a point of view of on a larger map, for example. Okay, think about a map like Wake Island. The reason I would like to see them on a map like Wake Island is because, yeah, sure, we have kind of like lightweight troop transports, but I love the idea of like, hey, you know, you're over at Echo, and all of a sudden you see there's a strong concentration of enemy coming over at A. Well, you know, we used to have like nice little boats that you could ferry across between there on previous battlefields, so they've taken that away. I was only saying the other day how awesome it would be if, like, hey, okay, let's bring in our transport heli, pick up a tank or something, just take it across and drop it down, and all of a sudden you've got a whole kind of different kind of combat going on there. But also, you know, again, maybe you could focus it on the fact that if you wanted it to be kind of for pickup and dropping down, you have to set it up accordingly. You have to kind of tweak its classes. Maybe its actual kind of loadout is specific to being able to do that. I mean, currently with the transport heli, you don't have any kind of ability to kind of you know, change its loadout. If you were to have a massive helicopter like the Stallion, you could change it to be like a pickup and drop, or you could put it in as a payload, so you add like mounted machine guns, etc., more firepower, more guns, so it becomes a kind of a flying kind of battle vehicle as such, rather than a kind of transport heli which can kind of drop and things. But again, it would be completely dependent on how you wanted to play it, how you wanted to play it with your squad. But yep, that would be one for me. That's one I would love to see in the game there. Okay, let's go on with the next thing. Okay, Pat Max, he said he wants to see Commander Mode. Well, we talked a bit about that before. He wants to see Commander Mode back, and he wants to see 64 players on next gen. Well, those are very kind of like statistical kind of things, apart from Commander there. He also wants to see more destruction. There's a few here. He's listed quite a few, so I'll just run through him. He wants to see more destruction, special weather conditions. That's an interesting one that people have mentioned. I want to talk a little bit about that. He says that jets should be able to drop bombs. We've mentioned that. He says ships that you can drive. That wasn't very specific, but I'm assuming he doesn't mean small boats. I think he means literally like kind of battleships. Again, kind of interesting. We talked a little bit about that kind of concept before as well, the idea of kind of you know, naval bombardment onto land, so perhaps that kind of goes hand in hand with that. We've talked a bit about that in the last video. More camos for each weapon, ghillie suit for the recon class, dog tag editor. The reason I kind of put those together, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with this. A lot of people have mentioned about they want to see more customization, etc. We'll touch on that as well in a mo. More factions. That's a kind of interesting concept to throw in. Less points for reviving. That's very specific, and I think also that ties in with the planning we've talked about before about the kind of reviving with the paddles, how that mechanic would work. More optics and scopes, more transport helis and maps, dirt bikes, quads, and then the last one he's put down is cookable grenades. Now, a bit of a shopping list there, Daskro, but it is. But I think a couple that I want to pick up on the most are the special weather conditions. Commander mode, I kind of load that in with the battle recorder. It's something people want. I think it's a possibility that we're probably going to see it. It would be fantastic for those people that remember how Commander Mode works, etc. It's a very, very strong thing. But yeah, special weather conditions. The ships we've talked about on the other video with the bombardment, but if you want to talk about that. And as I say, the camos, etc. The reason I find that a bit contentious is I'm kind of like, is that sort of detracting a little bit from what Battlefield is about, making it too much about the aesthetic when it should really be about the gameplay for me. But out of that list, is there anything that really stands out for you?
Well, on the camo side, I will say that I too sort of created a Battlefield wish list, and camo is one of the things that I would like to see. I'd like to see different types of vehicle camos. I think that'd be really neat. But just like in other games out there, the camos, they can be sort of different colors, and I get that. But if they're big unlocks, ones that require a lot of effort, I really don't want them to be a big impact to the actual gameplay in terms of giving someone an advantage over the other. I made the comment that I'd love to see blue tank camo, because it actually would hinder players if they want to use for it, but it makes it for fun, interesting gameplay. But at the same time, I don't want to go too far out of it, because I don't want people running around with pink and orange guns and tanks and stuff, because then it gets to the point where it becomes a bit too. It breaks away from the immersion, and I don't like that aspect in that respect.
Yeah. I mean, it's put down here as well, optics and scopes, for example, and cookable grenades and all these kind of things. Optics and scopes. Now, I feel like actually with Battlefield, they put in quite a lot of optics and scopes.
I have to agree with you there. I mean, as someone who actually owns a lot of the scopes that are in Battlefield for my own gun collection, I will tell you that there's only a few scopes that they haven't covered, and further, unless you are really into scopes, you really won't be able to tell that much of a difference on them. Yeah. And we can only look at like Medal of Honor Warfighter, who went super authentic, and all the different scope selections out there. That if you want to go from Battlefield 3 level to Warfighter level, okay, I get that, but you're getting to the point where now it's just the differences are so minute that most people won't appreciate it, and I think they got their bases covered already as it is.
I'll tell you one thing that I would like to see with the optics and scopes, though, which I have to say I don't think will end up being in the game, but I would love to see it in the game, would be the option to mount your optic in a slightly different position in terms of the distance that it runs along. So how close is it to you in terms of field of view? So when you pull up the gun, how, maybe you can only move it by a certain increment, so obviously you couldn't have it right down the end. That would be insane. It wouldn't work. But the ability to kind of tweak it a little bit, because I think something that's been commented on is that people like the kind of reticules of certain optics, but they dislike the kind of disproportionate amount of screen space that the certain optics will take up. Now obviously in reality, when you hold a weapon or whatever and you pull it up to your eye, you're going to be sort of looking down that sight in a different way depending on how you're going to hold it, etc. And obviously you can move the optics around a little bit. So I think that's something that I would like to see, just add that kind of customization, just allow people to tweak it a little bit, give people something that will actually relate to their in-game, kind of, balance their weapon a little bit more so that they kind of can have a little bit more control. Is that something you want to see as well?
I think that'd be pretty cool. There are different philosophies in utilizing rifles and carbines out there, one of which is optics placement, whether you want it right next to your eye, or do you want it way far closer to the barrel. Different perspectives on there. I don't have a problem with that. I think that'd be pretty neat.
What do you think as well, just topic, we haven't talked since we've sort of seen a lot of Battlefield 4 stuff, what do you think as well about the kind of switching momentum that we've seen there with Battlefield 4, obviously going from a kind of optic to iron sight movement? What do you think about that?
the off-axis iron sights. So this is something that has existed a while in real life for a long time. It's to me it's a bit of a gimmick, and here's why. What people usually do is that when they will have a set of optics and they'll have a set of iron sights on the same 12 o'clock rail, and if their optics go down, they get shot or the battery runs out, they have a quick detach capability to essentially swing the optic away from that line of sight, and then your iron sights are still there. There is another course of reasoning that says, well, no, you want to have a dedicated optics set and you want to have the off-sight relief. But when you see that most of the time in real life, it's not done in combat. It's done with people who are doing competition shooting that want to have that one little advantage in terms of having different optics options as opposed to having just an 8x optic or a 4x optic and that's it. This gives them an alternative. In a lot of training or combat training out there, what they'll suggest is that you can still use an off-axis sight picture, but it's really for engaging targets that are 50 yards or less, because if they are 50 yards or less, at that point you're not trying to go for 1 minute of angle accuracy. Instead, you're just trying to hit bodies, and you can able to get that sight picture, and as long as you can point that gun approximately in the right direction, you can still get hits on it. Those are different philosophies of training that are out there. But the point is, you really don't see that kind of off-axis iron sight feature being used by a lot of. You're not seeing someone who is in Afghanistan right now using that kind of thing. Or
I think it'll translate very well in. I think it'll translate very well into Battlefield, though, because I think there's so many situations I could imagine it working. For example, with weapons that I enjoy, like the G3, it's a great weapon for kind of range firing as well as close quarters, provided you don't get a kind of face-to-face confrontation with someone with an M16, in which case you're going down. But it is good for those kind of, it's a powerful gun, and at close you can drop people with sort of 3 rounds, etc. if you get it on target. So it's a powerful gun. But the fact that you may want to be firing at those longer ranges as well, you know, I can usually handle range firing with the G3 with just like a hollow sight or something, because I often have a very good eye at seeing people at long range. It doesn't matter if it's like a pinprick, I can usually hit them. However, it would be nice to have the option of having that kind of range, like for example just a 4 or a 6 scope, whatever you want to put on it, have that extra range option. But then you know, you can go from a kind of medium range, long range situation. Instantly you may need to turn around to your right and you're in a close quarter situation, because what if someone's coming at you from the side? So it would be great to be firing medium, and then all of a sudden you're aware someone's coming at you from the side to your right, you turn, switch your optic as you turn, and immediately you have prepared yourself for that kind of different range situation where you're going to be able to see much more clearly. And I think as well, what we talked about before there, we were saying about the optics taking up you know, a negative amount of screen space. This is going to alleviate that problem greatly, where you'd be using your optic and it's fine for long range because you're looking at a very kind of narrow perspective on what you're actually firing at. But then when you want to change up to, as I say, a close quarter situation, you're going to have that option there. And I think that's really going to improve gameplay a lot.
As you describe that, I actually agree with you more and more on this, only because it provides another game mechanic in order to compensate for the kind of situation that you described. Because how I described in real life, how, you know, different gun interaction is being used, a lot of that can't be translated into a game, because it's just beyond the limitations that we have with playing on a, you know, on a gamepad or on a mouse and keyboard interface. And so I actually agree more and more with your reasoning on why it's a good thing to be in the game.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and I think the last thing I'd sort of will pick out of these, as I say, a lot of those things were kind of little technical things. Cookable grenades, that would be really nice if they put that in there, but it's nothing to particularly write home about, I don't think. Less points for reviving. Again, I've talked a lot about reviving mechanics there. I think Daskro would agree that there's room for manoeuvre on sort of reviving mechanics. I mean, we've talked plenty about this. Bullet point, Daskro, on reviving mechanics, what would you like to see?
The spamming tempered. I don't want to. I don't want to have constant revive trains and other things around those lines. I'm not saying that you necessarily increase or decrease the amount of how fast you can revive people or how fast you can get up or anything else around those lines. There's a lot of different variables that can be tweaked here. And when people went back to Bad Company 2 and found that the reviving function was terrible and that big changes were being made in the process for it, it went through various extremes. And so we have to just keep in mind that no one solution may be the right answer, and that it may require an iterative process to get that right balance between what is a viable mechanic versus not a viable mechanic.
Yep, I think that's definitely fair to say. Okay, and of course, I think the last one I'll just mention here is the Commander mode. Now, you've been a long time Battlefield player. Commander mode, you know, a lot of people have said they really wanted to see this with Battlefield 3. Commander mode, do you want to see it back for Battlefield 4? And also, what do you think would be the best kind of way for it to be sort of integrated, implemented into the game system that we have right now? And also, maybe do you want to just kind of overview for people that I'm sure there's people that have never seen the Commander mode, they didn't even know what it is. Do you want to kind of outline for people what that may be as well?
Sure. Commander mode was a option to play in Battlefield 2, where if you were commander, you would be able to when you're essentially just sitting in the base, be able to take a third-person perspective of the entire game, almost like looking from a fixed-wing aircraft or a helicopter, like an RTS game. And you could do different types of features. For instance, you could deploy a temporary UAV, which would circle a small area and provide not only you a 3D picture of that area, almost like an RTS game where you see little guys running around, but also would 2D spot everyone for the players that were near that area and could see on their map that, oh, look, there's guys in this little area that's being UAV scanned at the time. You could also drop supply packs. Supply packs would give you ammo and ammunition to the players. And on top of this, you could also do artillery strikes, which were these big bombardments of strikes that took place, and you could destroy infantry on a given point or vehicles that were in place. And then you could finally drop Humvees. You could drop these little Jeeps from the air. They'd parachute down, they could land, and you could grab them and you could do your thing with it. You could also crush people with them. So if you could drop them, you could drop them on someone's head. It would kill them if they get hit by them. But with all these assets, there were various assets in the bases where you were doing all this from that could be destroyed. So if you were a spec ops guy and you could sneak into the enemy base, you could put a bunch of C4 down on the enemy, on the artillery and on the satellite uplink, and when you blow it up, all those aspects of the game would go away for that commander. So it was kind of a big deal to like sneak in and destroy those kind of assets. Now, on to my opinion of Battlefield 4 Commander Mode. I'd like to see it, but I think I'd like to see it in a way that is not just a carbon copy of Battlefield 2, but offers some new features that are balanced, but not necessarily like big game changing. So in Battlefield 2, the artillery strike reset, I believe it was every 2 minutes. It was not a quick artillery strike, thereafter. And as such, I like the idea that it was something that could be tempered. On top of this, my number one wish list for Battlefield 4 is this idea of having organized ladder matches and a matchmaking system where platoons fight each other platoons in an organized match on a server. I love this idea that you would have maybe a platoon of 15 or 20 people fight another platoon of the same size, and then you have an organized match, and you have organized squads, and you can have a commander who actually is going to command things, not just random guys running around, and then the commander's just dropping a Humvee down or doing an arty strike. I want that commander to really be sort of the eyes and ears of this team and have them have a role no different than the tank guy or the recon guy or what have you. And so that's what I'd like to see. If they don't have a ladder-based matchmaking system, Commander Mode may be more of a gimmick, like the support guy going mortar, that kind of thing. And it'd be really sad to see that take place. But that's my idea of what I'd like to see in Commander Mode in the future.
I think it would be really good to bring it back. It was a really strong role generally for Battlefield 2. I mean, the thing is, my only concern is that when you have something like that, it can be a real pain in the ass if somebody gets into that role or position when they don't really know what they're doing. It can be, and especially if it kind of has too much of a powerful overview on the battlefield. I do remember situations where it could be patently clear that the guy on the other team knew really, really well what he was doing, and it could really turn a battle around so much. With the kind of way that the kind of mass population of Battlefield has gone now, when you think about the kind of player-based community has exploded compared to what it would have been with Battlefield 2, I think people would remember very easily that kind of the gameplay we've seen in previous Battlefields is not the same kind of gameplay that you get now. For sure, okay, there's going to be times when you used to play Bad Company or Battlefield 2 where you would have ridiculous situations on servers with the way people are playing. But now, obviously, just the higher quantity of people that are playing, it's more exacerbated. So that would be a small concern for me. And like you say, I think it needs to obviously always be balanced like anything. So they need to kind of appropriately balance the kind of roles that the Commander Mode has. However, I think there could be a lot of interesting things like we've said. There's a lot of thought. In fact, I think I would like to kind of do another video talking specifically about Commander Mode, just our ideas of, we could come up with a lot of ideas of sort of, okay, Commander Mode, what can you do? Like, how far can you take it? What can he do as a role? So guys, I mean, if you have ideas about Commander Mode, if you remember it from Battlefield 2, if you've got ideas about what you'd like to see Commander Mode do in Battlefield 4, jot it down below and maybe we'll have another discussion talking about that, because I think it's a really interesting one, to be honest. But I have to say, I do want to see it in there. The other thing that I would say about Commander Mode is I would like to perhaps think about the mechanic of how do you get into the commander position. Is it literally just a free-for-all where you're kind of like, you get into the round at the beginning, like picking up a vehicle and you're like, I want to be commander, and like everybody has to go for it? Bear in mind as well, it's not the kind of role for everyone. All right, some people don't want to play that role. They don't want to play the kind of overview support role. They want to be on the ground, getting in the mix, and they want to fight. They want that gunplay. So sitting back and taking a kind of tactical perspective is not always going to be what people want. But I do think it's interesting that maybe, perhaps only the top 4 or 5 players from a round, in terms of perhaps score or whatever, maybe that option is only available to them. So it's not available to everyone. So you really have to fight hard and play well to get that role. It's kind of like a reward for actually performing well in the round that you played before. So that's perhaps an option. Perhaps there's a bit of opportunity for that to be abused slightly. That's my only concern there as well. But I think there's room for sort of thought about kind of how you get into those positions, I think. So
yes, I mean, I'd liken it to how we get into the AC-130 in Armored Kill. you get into it, you can utilize the artillery that's on that AC-130, but it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Now, I agree with you. You need to have some kind of mechanic like they had in Battlefield 2, where the highest ranked player gets first choice,
Yeah.
and it goes down accordingly.
Exactly.
However, I like the idea that's vulnerable, that it's a circulating, like a C2 aircraft, like an AWACS or an AWNC, or even like an E2D kind of aircraft that isn't an offensive aircraft, but one that it has to be up in order to do its job and is vulnerable to enemy jets and enemy stingers and things like that. I like that idea, and because it means that commander mode is not taken for granted. It's something that you have to protect and maintain, no different than you have to protect and maintain certain points in order to get a tank or to get a helicopter, that kind of thing.
I mean, or perhaps it could be, for example, air vehicles tend to go down very quickly, like with the AC-130. You know, if you had a determined attack on it, a few stingers, it would go down. I think obviously the commander mode, it needs to it's a slightly more longer term attack plan. I tell you what, I would liken it to more. I just kind of thought of this randomly, was like in World of Warcraft when you play Alterac Valley, and obviously not everyone's going to know this, but if you remember from the old Alterac Valley, you used to be able to summon like a sort of defender of your faction. Okay, so you would have to gather resources, and then at a certain point in the game you could summon a giant sort of warrior to fight for your side. And at this point the game changed. Everyone had to focus on taking that guy down. I don't think obviously we're going to see anything like resource collection. That would be insane. But what it could be interesting is that commander mode only becomes available after a certain amount of sort of objectives have been captured or something like that. That could be interesting, or perhaps it could go the other way, where sort of if one team, you know, is far behind in tickets, maybe it's like a little benefit, like a boost to kind of actually help them out. Or as I say, where I was actually thinking of it was where we were talking about kind of, okay, what you'd have in the sky or whatever. We've talked a little bit about naval vessels and things like this. What if it was a kind of an armoured vehicle as such, like you could have sort of an armoured radar vehicle or something like that that's sat back in the base. Maybe you could manoeuvre it around a little bit or whatever. So it's actually an armoured target. I think it would have to have more armour, certainly, than an aircraft, because the aircraft go down very, very quickly. I would like to see it more as a heavily armed target that would require a bit of a battle to take it down, because I think if you're going to play the commander role, you want to be in that role for a little bit of time. You don't want to get in it, just start to make some moves and then have some guy C4 you, or a couple of stingers and you go down and you've only been in it for about 30 seconds. That would be really frustrating, and I think it would kind of be detrimental to the role of the commander role. I mean, what do you think about that?
I like that idea, actually, because I like the idea of sort of an armored bunker that you can be in, and that it's kind of vulnerable and almost like you lock yourself in, and you can do some things, but if they put enough C4 on it, they put enough bombs on it, or whatever it may be, or if it's a process like hack the door to like break into it, that'd be kind of cool. I mean, I'm actually open to that idea, as long as it can be tempered in a way that it's not just, it's very easy to stop it, or alternatively, once I get in there, I'm unstoppable, that kind of thing. I like that idea.
Or it could be, for example, as well, imagine if you had, for example, like Battlefield 1943, where they had the bombing raids that could come in, and you'd have to go to the kind of radar station once you captured a position. I mean, again, perhaps commander mode would return, but only in Conquest, not, again, Rush. I mean, not to say that, I love Rush. It's a fantastic game mode, but I think commander mode generally is going to play out a lot better in Conquest than it would in Rush, just because of the style and general scale of the maps that you're playing on there. But again, people will remember from 1943 that when the bombing raid comes in, your fighters have a certain amount of time to try and shoot down the sort of small fleet of bombers that are coming in. So again, perhaps if as a commander there's certain kind of passive things that you could do, like highlight targets, direct troops, sort of say mark targets, call in artillery strikes, etc. But then maybe when you have these support roles, maybe dropping extra weapons, vehicles, etc., they come in via aircraft, be they helicopters, or like we saw the C-130s dropping vehicles, etc. Again, maybe those are destructible, and when you call in support with the C-130 or whatever, it comes from a distance, and like the bombing raid, and you have a certain amount of time to take that target out. So if you're distracted, if your air vehicles are either down or distracted, then you're not be able to take down the transport that's coming in there. But if you've got savvy, switched on aircraft pilots, they're going to be able to get in there. And again, I think that just it goes into sort of adding another role for people in jets and aircraft. Like I have already said before, I'd like to see jets remain in Conquest. It would just give them another element. Instead of just dogfighting constantly, it gives them another focus, something to actually engage them with. So I think that would be an interesting thing as well.
Agreed.
Okay, let's go on now with the last couple of our bits. So Devil God Spider, he says, please make snipers deadlier. It's a damn sniper. It's made for range. There's no explanation how even an M98B with 95%, 100% would not kill someone with one shot. One more thing, if a player gets below 25%, you should make them degenerate until 0% health. If you do that, then it's okay and there'll be no more 0 to 1% problems, unless he has, for example, medkit. And then another guy, Bravo Alpha Zero, came in and said, I like that idea. He would just adjust it so the bleed out effect only happens when you are hit by large caliber gunfire, sniper rounds to the torso area, 50 cal rounds anywhere to the body. This is merely for the sake of keeping people from crying it's overpowered, as being hit from 2 rounds of a PDW ammo at 50 meters would still make the average person bleed out in real life. I have to say that I thought that the bleed out idea was a really awesome idea. I really like that idea that when you get down to say maybe 20%, etc., your character ticks down in health. It wouldn't be perhaps like a drop like you have 10 seconds to survive. I think it could be a gradual drop, so it's like 1% and then another 2%, so you kind of drop down slowly. It gives you enough time to try and find a med kit, but it gives that impression that you're critically injured. But so the two things there, snipers being more powerful and this bleed out effect. What do you think about those things, Daskro?
I can see snipers being more powerful. I don't have a problem with that. I think they need to be more viable. I do like the infantry bleed out because it's very similar to the vehicle bleed out. Once vehicles get disabled, they start bleeding out, and you got to repair up to 100% in order to stop that bleed. And I like that idea. I think it should be applied to infantry guys as well. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah,
I do. I think it's quite a simple, straightforward idea. I think it would stop some of the kind of ridiculous situations. It doesn't really make sense. I mean, we often talk about how you can't take real life things and put them into the game because it's a game. It's not designed to be like real life. It's supposed to be just kind of an environmental thing, and we take certain aspects, but we generally make it to have an enjoyable gameplay experience. But this would actually kind of make sense. It's just a logical thing. It's not about trying to imitate real life, because if that was the case, if you got hit by a round, it would take your arm off or whatever, so it's kind of, if you get hit by a 50 cal sniper rifle, it's going to do a fair bit of damage. But I do think that the bleed out effect is a good one. I think it would make people more aware of their health. They wouldn't just think, hey, you know what, I'm just going to sit behind this corner and wait for a minute and then I'll have full health again. No, if they actually get below 20%, they have to seek a medic. And I think it would, it would really bring in the role of medic. I think that's something else that people have mentioned about something they want to see in Battlefield 4. They would like to see some kind of class changes. Talked about maybe bringing back in the specialist or making again the kind of medic class there, so you actually have a medic. So those are some interesting things that kind of go hand in hand. Snipers, myself, got to say, I don't think I really want to see snipers more powerful. If you are good as a sniper, you can still do well in the game, and we see this all the time. I think what I would like to see is snipers have a little bit more variation in kit. I've talked about I mentioned that what I would like to see is, instead of having a recon class, actually have a kind of like a specialist class. The specialist can take recon kit, but he can also take kit like underwater. Okay, so he can be kind of like Navy SEAL. He can approach bases from underwater, maybe even have kind of spear gun equipment depending on the map setup, etc, etc. Maybe he just has specialist kit that allows him to be involved climbing equipment, for example, so it allows him to kind of clamber up things, so he can just kind of do a different role there. That's really what I would like to see with the sniper role, instead of just making them more powerful. I feel like if you make sniper rifles more powerful, the only thing that's going to happen is going to be people running around with sniper rifles, trying to no-scope people, quick-scope people. That's what's going to happen if you make snipers more powerful. You won't have people sitting off at far away trying to get those perfect kills any more than you are now. But what you will see is people running around in close quarters with a sniper rifle, trying to hip-fire people to get those little shots onto YouTube. I think that's what would really happen. Okay, so going on to our very, very last thing now, which we'll just cover quickly. This was actually my comment. I didn't intend for one of my comments to be the top voted ones, but it just seemed to actually go that way in the end. Me and Daskro have mentioned this before as well, so again, we can kind of bullet point this one. We don't really need to talk tons about it, but it's about the miniguns in the transport helis. Miniguns in real life, unbelievably powerful tool. Yet in Battlefield, sure, you can get kills with them, but it often feels like you're just firing tic tacs. You can fire tons and tons and tons of round where you know there's enemy, you're hitting on target, and you just get hit markers. Similarly, when firing at vehicles, you can fire rounds and rounds and rounds, and it seems to really do very little. Daskro, would you like to see a bit of a change to the miniguns? We've talked about perhaps having a balance in terms of stronger power, but a much longer reload time. At the moment, they don't even have a reload time; they just have an overheating. What do you think?
I would love to see them changed. I'd like to see them do a whole lot more damage because it's a lot of guns.
Yeah.
But the thing is that what is not captured within Battlefield 3 is that you run out of ammo pretty fast.
Yeah, sure.
With a minigun, because it's no kidding shooting. It's shooting. It's like I forget how many rounds a minute it shoots. I want to say it's like between like 2,000 and 6,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable how fast it goes through ammo. And I mean,
it's a horrific weapon as well. This is my point. Is like if you were to fire at infantry in game, it's not nice to think about. But if you got hit by that in real life, it would pretty much cut you in half. And it's insane that when you translate that into a game situation, you can just get a hit marker. That's insane. If you touch an enemy, they should just be dead. It's just a crazy gun.
They should be. But I think it needs to be able to have a limited ammo.
Yeah.
As opposed to overheating, because it's more likely it's going to run out of ammo before it overheats in real life, at least. I'd like to be able to see it run out of ammo, and maybe it takes like 15 seconds to reload it, or something else around those lines.
It's vehicle mounted anyway, so the chances are you can do like a sweeping run, or maybe it's just like a defensive thing. Imagine if you're coming into land with a transport heli to pick people up or drop them off. You're using the minigun in that specific moment to cover the guys that you're dropping, okay? So maybe there's enemies around on the ground. You can just lay down heavy cover fire. You clear that area for the guys that are being dropped off, then the heli takes away, and in that process you start to reload. That's how I imagine it to work, you know.
I agree. And maybe it's a manual reload, maybe you have to go back to the base and reload it. I don't know. But I mean, if it was like super powerful where, no kidding, if you graze someone with the crosshairs, it kills them because there's that many bullets hitting them, then maybe it's okay for you to go through the ammo than having to go back to base and reload. I mean, if it's that powerful.
I think it would have to be the case.
Get into it, just waste the 3 seconds of ammo, and then you're like, oh shit, and you're done.
Yeah, I think as well. I mean, that's the thing. I think I would happily go for a long reload, so you had to keep doing sweeps and movements. I mean, that's the other thing as well, is if you had it as a powerful weapon, you couldn't stay in an area too long, because as soon as he's fired off those rounds, you're going to have to get out of there for a bit anyway, because you're going to have no defense whatsoever. But I do think there's room for a bit of movement there, so I think it'd be an interesting one. Right, okay, I think we'll wrap up here, guys. So, it's been a little bit of a discussion today talking about Battlefield 4, a couple of the choices that you guys have suggested. I would like to say, we'll go on and talk a bit more about these things. If there's any thing in this video today that you disagree with or agree with, please note it down in the comments below. We'd be really interested to hear what you guys have got to say. And as I say, we'll talk a little bit more about Commander Mode. How do you envisage that working in Battlefield 4? What would you like to see Commander Mode do as well? How powerful would you like it to see? Would you like it to be a kind of passive effect where it's more aimed at directing troops and maybe dropping off a certain amount of supplies? Or do you want it to see quite offensive with kind of naval aerial bombardments onto enemies, onto specific positions, mortar fire, etc., mortar volleys, whatever? How do you want to see it involved in the game? Note that below. I think that's an interesting one to talk about on a future video. Just want to thank Daskro again today. Good discussion. Thanks for joining me, Daskro.
Thank you.
So, as I say, guys, thanks for watching today. Hope you've enjoyed. If you enjoyed the video, drop it a like and so on. And see you next time for a little bit more Battlefield 4 discussion with me and I hope Daskro.
See you guys later.